Hello, everyone, and welcome to the GRESB Inside ESG event series. Today, our topic is about ESG strategy and looking more specifically into water management. My name is Evan Kirby, and I'm a manager on the member relations team at GRESB. I'm going on 4 years now with the company in various capacities as GRESB has been able to grow. We're very excited to be co-hosting this event with our premier partner, SmartButton. I thought I would start with some introductions of our organizations. So what does SmartButton do? SmartButton monitors and analyzes water consumption through main meters and submeters in various types of assets like office and residential. Their comprehensive water efficiency services work with any meter in any building around the world and help save water, time, and money, and of course is contributing to a more resource efficient and sustainable future. I'd also like to briefly introduce GRESB, as we have many attendees on the call today that may or may not have been directly involved with GRESB reporting in the past. Mission-driven and investor-led, GRESB is the environmental, social, and governance, or ESG benchmark for real assets. We work in collaboration with the industry to provide standardized and validated ESG data to the capital markets. The 2022 real estate benchmark covers more than 1,800 property companies, REITs, funds, and developers. Our coverage for infrastructure includes over 800 infrastructure funds and assets. Combined, GRESB represents $8.6 trillion in US dollars in real asset value. Today, we are excited to be talking about a slightly different topic than we typically hear about in the context of ESG and sustainability, which is water management. With endless events on energy and carbon, we're hoping that spending some time digging into how organizations approach water management within their overall ESG strategy will prove insightful and engaging. Water is an important topic in the context of sustainability and is a measured performance metric within the context of the GRESB assessments. GRESB assesses water in several ways when looking at the real estate assessment. Across the assessment, water makes up about 10 points out of the 100 total points, meaning it's the second most important performance metric in terms of score, only behind energy. The most important metric for water is data coverage, meaning how much water data you have based on the floor area of the portfolio of buildings over a 12-month period. In addition, GRESB assesses year-over-year water consumption changes, as well as water reuse and recycling metrics. Lastly, we're also collecting water efficiency measures implemented at the asset level, such as smart metering systems or high-efficiency fixtures. Our premier partner, SmartButton, assists with many of the required metrics for GRESB reporting and directly helps achieve points related to data coverage as an example. We'll be hearing more about this in the keynote presentation in just a couple of minutes. And yeah, in terms of today's agenda, we will be starting with a 10 to 15-minute keynote from the SmartButton team on strategies for water efficiency. This will be followed up by a panel discussion on best practices for water management with representatives from AXA IM, Cromwell Property Group, and Fabagea, all of whom are mutual clients of GRESB and SmartButton. Lastly, we will have some time at the end for a Q&A. So some housekeeping, please feel free to post questions throughout the event in the chat box on the right side of your screen. If your question is specific to a certain speaker, please also mention this in the question so I can properly allocate it towards the end. Yeah, we've got a great turnout for the event with over about 500 people registered, so I'm hoping we'll have some great questions posed to the speakers. And with that, I will now turn it over to Carl from the SmartButton team.
Thank you, Kevin. We are delighted to be here and be able to talk about what we think will be one of the defining issues for our generation, water management. I hope you can all hear me well. The date is very well suited for this event. It's the eve of the World Water Day, which is happening tomorrow, with the theme Be the Change. Now, we at SmartButton, we celebrate World Water Day every day of the year, you can say. We have been doing so for the last 10 years. Our mission is really to help enable more water-efficient communities. We're very happy to see the interest in this event. All of you attendees coming here to hear about water, and also the support we're now getting from GRESB and other stakeholders in the ecosystem to advance water on the ESG agenda. My name is Carl Jeppsson. I'm the head of business development with SmartButton. I am talking to you from our office here in Stockholm, Sweden today. And with me today, I also have Hanna here. Hanna, if you would like to introduce yourself also. Hanna is muted, so we cannot hear Hanna for the moment, I think.
Right. Thank you, Carl. I think that is better. Hello, everybody. My name is Hanna. I work as a key account manager for Smartvatten, also based in Stockholm, Sweden, but my clients are spread out across Europe.
Thank you, Anna. So today we're going to give an overview of the water situation across Europe and how the real estate sector can improve water management with technologies that are available already today. And you'll then be able to hear from the panel of our distinguished guest here, which Kevin introduced, about their ways of managing water and how water plays an important role in their overall ESG strategies. But for now, let's take a moment to think back about the summer of 2022. I hope and I'm sure there will be some nice memories brought to mind, but also on a more serious note. Many of you might remember this was the driest summer in Europe in over 500 years. So water issues are becoming more tangible for all of us. Droughts and water scarcity are no more rare or extreme events. As the numbers tell you here on this slide, more than 30% of the inhabitants in Europe are affected by water scarcity. And this is already an old number. I think the number is even higher today. And also, because of the consequences of water scarcity, what it has on our lives, the nature around us, for food, for energy production, I would say that the correct number is 100%. All of us will directly or indirectly feel the consequences of increasing water shortages. Now, it has also become clear that it will not take 500 years until we experience a similar drought again. Instead, what we're seeing is an effect of the changing weather patterns driven by climate change. And as the Guardian calls it, this is going to be the new normal. As you can see on the map, vast areas of Europe are already affected by water scarcity. And I think many of you have seen the pictures or even experienced firsthand what's going on in the Alps right now. The lack of snowfall and rainfall in Europe indicates that we are also facing similar water shortages in the coming summer here. So with the widespread implications, the water issues are a shared challenge across all sectors of our communities. One important way to look at this is the so-called water-energy nexus. This is a fundamental principle that explains the interdependence of water and energy, meaning that for almost all types of energy production, significant amounts of water is required. Whether this is nuclear, fossil, or even renewable energy sources, there is water required to either produce the equipment used for energy production or in the process itself. But also correspondingly, water production requires a lot of energy. There is energy needed for water treatment, water pumping, distribution, and even more so for wastewater collection and wastewater treatment. 1 to 2 kilowatt hours per cubic meter can be assumed to be used for water production in this cycle. And furthermore, a lot of energy is also consumed when producing the hot water that we're using in our taps. All in all, with this example that we have on the slide here, more than 10%, 12% in Sweden, of the total annual energy production is used for handling water in this way. However, the way I look at this, the water energy nexus also represents a great opportunity. By saving water, we will also be saving energy. So how are we then using water across the water cycle? Well, the somewhat sad answer is that we're wasting a lot of it. When you sum up the leakages from the source or from the purification plants all the way across the cycle, there is enormous volumes leaking out from the system already today. Around the world, water utilities are battling with leakages in the numbers of 10 to 20 or even higher percentages. This is the normal across our societies. There is a very significant renovation need across the sector. We have in our Western world pipelines that are more than 100 years old and that need renovation. This will also drive up the cost for water in the future. We're expecting that all of the water users will have to pay that through higher tariffs in the very near future also. Furthermore, at Smart Vatten, where we're focused on the customer side of the water cycle here, we see leakages in about 50% of the buildings every month. And with the average leak being 1.7 liters per minute, that quickly adds up. So that would add up in 30 days, if no action is taken, that means 80 cubic meters. So that is 80,000 liters running out from an average leak. So clearly there's a need for actions around water management, and those actions need to span across the whole society here. Regulators like the EU are increasingly focusing on the water. Water is integrated now, will be covered in the NFRD. It'll be covered in the EU taxonomy, and also actually through the Energy Efficiency Directive, where the requirement to individually measure hot water consumption in apartments is an example of that. However, we see that it's not the regulation that is driving the real estate industry forward right now. What we hear and see from many of our partners and clients and other stakeholders is that it's the certifications like GRESB that are the primary incentive and the most tangible objective that we're working towards. As Kevin mentioned, water is the second most important objective and stands for 10% of the overall GRESB scoring system. And gaining points on the water side is sometimes a very cost-effective way to actually improve the scoring overall for a property. So we all understand there is a huge need for water management going forward, and there is a huge will to do it also. But in practice, the situation might look like this in many cases. So Hanna will take us through an overview of how you can actually move on from this point.
Well, thank you very much, Carl. I'm really happy that we are here today and we actually have the chance to talk more about water. Now, I meet many property owners that faces the challenges with getting quality data to work with. Many of them also have a geographical spread, meaning you have different water meters, water companies, or different kind of setups. And the reporting can be very time consuming. So the dream scenario here would be to have a complete overview of all your properties into one platform, where we then can follow the water consumption, pattern, leaks, etc. And then you will be able to make the right decision and investments going forward. So how do we do this? How do we get there? Well, Carl, if you turn to the next slide, please. I will talk a little bit about that. Thank you. Step one, get the overview on your properties and see how they are doing. With our range of tools, we are able to connect almost any existing water meter and digitize the reading and provide you with minute level data. So this is really easy to install. Anyone can do it. It takes about 5 minutes. And it's easy to get started, and it's also easy to scale up across your portfolio. We actually have a lot of clients that are surprised how easy it is to install and that they can do it themselves. Now, if you look at the picture in the middle, once you're up and running, you will be able to follow the water consumption and you will get automated leak alerts, you will get consumption reports. And furthermore, if you look to the right, you will be able to receive data-driven assessments, which indicate on which property it is recommended to take the next step. And what could that be? Well, for example, connecting additional metering points, installing smart valves or water-saving equipment. And now, one thing we also have learned along the way is that our clients really appreciate our customer success team. They will help you get the most value of the data and make sure that you reach those ESG goals. Well, with that being said, it's not that hard to get started, and we will be with you every step of the way towards your goals, and of course, earning those points from GRESB. So, Carl, do you have something to add to this slide?
Well, thank you, Hanna, for the insights. And I have nothing to add to the slide in general, but I would just close out this keynote by observing that it's very clear that technology is not the obstacle really for advancing water management. But once implemented, it's also very important that we make sure we use the data in the right way, eliminate noise from the data, make sure we get quality alarms and insights that really can engage the organization, even maybe the tenants. So with that, I would like to turn to the panel to discuss water strategies and the implementation of those. And I'd like to start it out first with an introduction of our panelists, of course. Starting with Cromwell. Maybe Sandrine, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sandrine Fauconnet, ESG manager for Europe at Cromwell. We just over 4 years, and we're managing investment management, fund management for diverse assets, logistics and office buildings mainly.
Thank you. You also have Adi there. Adi, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Adi Buzula. I'm with the company Cromwell since 2020, December. I'm a project manager, and one of the projects is making sure that we get all smart water meters across our portfolio.
Thank you, Adi. And then we have Fabege here, represented by Caroline Odin.
Hi everyone, my name is Caroline Odin and I am an energy manager at Fabege. For those of you who don't know Fabege, we are a real estate company in Stockholm, mainly focusing on offices. And we have a big management portfolio, but we also build new buildings.
Thank you, Caroline. And we also have AXA IM with us here, represented by Juliette.
Hi everyone, Juliette Lefebvre. I'm Deputy Head of Responsible Investment for AXA IM. We are in the alternatives business unit. We manage different type of assets. I'm focused on real estate. We manage 90 billion of real estate assets across globally, and we are the leading asset manager in Europe.
Thank you. And your colleague Thomas is here also.
Yes, thanks. On my side, also part of AXA IM, previously ESG lead for Benelux and Germany. Currently also more of a global focus together with Juliette, and have been working with Smartvatten for already 2 years now, I think. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you. And for the panel discussion, the first question would go to AXA IM. And could you share with us and the audience the role that water plays in the overall ESG strategy?
Yeah, sure. So water has been a key component of the assessment of buildings' environmental performance for a long time now for us. So we've set in 2016 an internal ESG rating to assess the ESG performance of our building. We do this on a yearly basis. It's really for us a way to monitor the improvement of the ESG performance of our assets during the ownership. To give you an idea, in 2022, we assessed 55 billion of AUM through this rating. And this rating was defined using key market frameworks, of course, such as GRESB, such as certification, but also reflecting in the weighting our own priorities. Within this rating, water-related factors represent 9% of the total score, which is, as you can see, really important. We assess water performance of our real estate assets through two main questions. So the first one is linked to the deployment of water efficiency measures to improve and optimize the use of water in our buildings. And the second one is linked to the water performance of our buildings, so water intensity in our buildings. And the second one is really challenging because to properly assess the second criteria, it means we have to access complete, accurate, and granular data, but we also need to access benchmarks to understand, how our assets compare to, similar asset type in similar geographies.
Absolutely, and maybe Thomas can explain a little bit more in detail how you're actually implementing the strategies around water then.
Thanks, Carl. I hope everyone can hear me well because my laptop is trying to become the first self-flying laptop, or at least that's what it's sounding like. But in terms to focus at how we approach water practically, is actually we try to work with key partners, of which SmartVatten is definitely one, not only in terms of data availability, but also real action. So to us, getting access to data was actually one of the first steps, and now we're actually assessing, okay, how do we move from data availability to actually real action through ensuring that our property management teams react to leak detection, but also that we onboard the other stakeholders in this ecosystem, being facility managers, property managers, to take a step back and to look at how the initial relationship with SmartVatten started was in Benelux and Germany. We started with a handful of assets. And after that, there was a certain success. We have expanded currently to approximately 300 buildings, not only in Benelux and Germany, but also a lot beyond. So we're approximately at 300 buildings now, and we're rapidly evolving to other assets in those 9 countries which we currently cover, with the plan to keep expanding, but also to assess, okay, based on the data, what can we do with this? So important for us is not only to understand what are our assets using in terms of water, but also are they efficient? So we're actually now trying to assess with the data, what can we do with it? Can we build benchmarks with it? And then in a second layer, how do we ensure that our property managers, the people day-to-day working with these kind of assets, react to the leak alerts to avoid that water is lost? Prime example we had with one of our assets in Luxembourg, where we got a leakage alert of 190 liters per minute. And if we didn't have SmartVatten, and I have another example where we didn't have it, there would be no way that we would have noticed until the entire basement or whatever area that was being flooded would be completely underwater. And an asset where we didn't have SmartVatten, for example, we also had a leak, and we had no clue until that there was an entire flooding, and as well when we got the final invoice that the water consumption not only doubled but tripled. And that's basically the physical effect that you can see. Maybe to end in terms of how we practically approach everything is a key way that we work with the kind of partners that we have, such as SmartVatten, is we try to focus on innovation. So we not only try to assess, okay, does it work? Then we scale it, but we also check how can we go beyond. So basically, how can we move from data availability, as I've mentioned, to actually using the data to do analysis, but also reacting, working with SmartVatten, for example, to develop a risk assessment specifically for GRESB, using all of the data we've gathered, but also to assess how can we more efficiently deploy it, train our stakeholders, and go beyond. So it's really more, instead of a service provider-client relationship, it has turned into more of a partnership.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And I think it's really worth highlighting how it was actually the GRESB framework that is driving the innovation, the source of the innovation here, how we wanted to find a way to perform those assessments based on the water risk assessment framework from GRESB. And it's been very nice and interesting working with you. Hopefully that will be a very fruitful exercise for XIM going forward. So if we turn it over to Cromwell here, Sandrine, would you like to explain to the audience a little bit about how water is integrated in your ESG strategy and how you're working with that?
Yeah, we do have used GRESB reporting for quite some years, and that has allowed us to identify gaps in specifically, and not only, but also on the water aspect. And when at the same time, when not a couple of years ago, when we started our technology journey to set up a central hub to be the base to collect all the ESG data for our European portfolio, we also wanted to use GRESB partners. So when we started the journey with DeepKey, we also realized that starting the journey with SmartVatten, they were already also partners together. So the whole setup process in that central hub highlighted a lot of inconsistencies from one country to another, specifically around water data, because some countries would be already equipped with smart meters, but some other you'd have to wait for 6 months for an invoice and to discover potentially a leak, where you for one asset from 1 year to another, you'd have a 3 or 5 time consumption. So that wouldn't, so the analysis of those is just too late, because the leak then is just massive, and then it takes time to search for it and to fix it. And so we wanted to be better at that with, for all the different type of asset, which is more difficult for industrial asset than office, we found out. And at the same time, our Dutch team, when they started working with used SmartVatten on certain assets, we realized that it was the good solution for us to get the proper data and to identify leaks and then take actions to rectify them. So we decided that we wanted to expand further to the rest of our European portfolio, and this is what we're doing at the moment. And I'm sorry if I'm in the dark, but it seems like the room doesn't want the lights here don't switch on anymore.
It's sustainable, Sandrine. It's sustainable.
Yes, they say that. So yeah, this is where we are. We're maybe not as advanced as the EXA team on this data collection journey, but I think we've made good progress. And so far, we only 20% of the portfolio covered with SmartVatten, but it's still an ongoing process. This year, we expect a bit more, taking into account all the specificities from one country to another.
Yeah, thank you, Sandrine. And I'd like to also highlight the fact that, SmartVatten is only one piece of the overall system that you're working in here, right? Also, and you mentioned that you're integrating the data into another platform, right? Yes.
So we can see the whole assets in SmartVatten. So that means from a water management analysis, I think it's very good for the teams, either from a European or country view. But at the same time, what we also wanted to have to streamline the flow of data to our central hub. And that's where the fact that you had that partnership with DeepKey was very key for us in the choice of continuing the integration for the rest of the portfolio in Europe.
Yeah, and that's something that we see across the board, I would say. Water is one part of managing an overall building, right? But it doesn't make sense to have a specific system for many, but you want this integration into your overall energy management system and so on. That's important.
Maybe, Carl, it's exactly the same on our side. We have the same ESG data platform, which is DeepKey, and we've also built strong partnership with them. And we can see that for reporting purpose, but also because we manage so many assets across so many geographies, it's really key for us that there are this kind of partnership that emerge between your different entities as well, so that it is for us the work, because reporting and assessing real estate performance is such a challenge, even when preparing for GRESB reporting. So it's really helpful, this kind of connections.
Yeah, clearly this is key, and also we're in this together, also with GRESB and other players to help advance the strategies here, of course. Adi, would you like to share from your perspective the experience of really implementing the water management technology?
Yeah, of course. Before I start doing that, I hear everybody speaking about making sure that we get all the data in for the ESG, for the GRESB, etc. But I think one of the key points for smart water meters or water management is creating awareness of at the occupier side and in the user side. So it's not just making sure that we all get the information into a data environment so we can report to the GRESB, but it's also making sure that everybody creates awareness of how much water they are actually using as a tenant, as a user. Okay. If I look at the water management and making sure that we get all the data in, I got in touch with Smart Vatten in the past. That was for my former employer. And they showed me how easy it is just with a simple water meter to cover it with a smart meter, which photographs every couple of seconds what the usage is. And based on that, it sends out a signal, of course, to the portal online, which also creates a very good securement when it comes to leakages. Based on that, we looked for us as Cromwell at the possibility to enlarge our insight in water management. So we chose for Smart Vatten. I had a lot of conversations with Tim Twisk. I think most of them know him. But our portfolio manager asked more than just making sure that we look at water meters and consumption. What if we could create a smart valve that signals big leakage, shuts down the valve. So in the case that Thomas mentioned, no larger leakages come forth, and more damages are, how do you say that? Avoided. Thank you. Bigger damages are avoided. Furthermore, we like the fact that there is a direct notification notifications towards our property managers, facility managers, so they can act on it straight away. And that makes sure that we do not use more water than necessary, of course. And I can see in the data I've received over the last 2 years from Smart Vatten that although we had a COVID period, the consumption has risen, of course, now. COVID is over, but it's still within the parameters of the past. So we're doing a good thing, I think, there. Overall, I think if it's Smart Vatten or another type of smart meter we can use in our portfolio, it's a big thing to make sure that we get all information.
Yeah, and many in the past have been operating almost without any knowledge, or maybe as Sandrine mentioned, looking at the bills every 6 months or every 1 year, right? But there's a lot of insights being lost.
Yeah, and the good thing is if I look at Smart Vatten, is they you guys do not only look at, okay, we've got a smart meter, we put it on top of another meter. No, you're still trying to innovate, looking at possibilities for meters who are outside the premises, are not easy to access. There's no electricity point. How do we create a smart meter that is driven by solar energy or by battery energy, etc.? So always try to innovate the possibilities. So that's a very good thing.
Maybe if we're allowed to add something from our side on this perspective, I think this is actually crucial, and I think some of the points mentioned are very valid for not only us but also other players in the market, being that data access is the first, whether you disregard it or not, because otherwise you have no clue of what your assets are consuming and you cannot compare. And that's to us, but it's still the first step, is getting access to data, allowing us to compare, and then going more granular. Because in the end, I think one of the main things which Carl and what other participants of the panel mentioned is the ability to quickly install it, to allow to integrate it with your overall processes, such as DeepKey on our side, but also other kind of tools. And I don't want to turn this too much in a promotional speech for SmartVatten, but I think if something works, it works, and that's something we can be very transparent about. But I think the next step, and that's also where I see not only our GRESB and SmartVatten, is this ecosystem approach. Is actually, now that we have access to data, how do we ensure that the right people get the leak alerts? How do you integrate the tenants? How do you integrate the property managers, facility managers? And that's basically the next frontier. So how do we integrate everyone who's concerned with this kind of asset, tools that we're using, the framework developers such as GRESB, and react to it to ensure that we all go in the right direction? Because water, based on the current discussions and the way the market is looking, tends to get a little bit less attention than energy, for example, but it doesn't mean it's less important. So how do we integrate this in all of the respective positions? How do we move forward? And that's basically where we are positioning ourselves towards, is to ensure that we not only capture data, but we move from this kind of monitoring to performance-based, being, okay, how do we monitor or judge the performance year on year in terms of efficiency, but also how do we ensure that our asset managers and property managers can react to it and know what actions to take. And I think there the proactivity that you mentioned on the side of SmartVatten is very important, because it allows us to enter into a proactive discussion and look together at how do we ensure that the data that we capture is correct, is benchmarked, and reacted upon. So on that, I would just say, keep on doing what you do, and we're very happy to assist and to be a sparring partner both at the side of GRESB as with SmartVatten, in order to keep on innovating in the market, not only for this risk assessment, but also protocols, processes, and so forth.
Totally agree, Thomas.
Yeah, and there is still a lot of room for innovation on this side, of course. I would say that in general, I feel that water has been a little bit an afterthought, partially because it's been so cheap. Water hasn't been a major cost compared to electricity, for example, on the building side. But I feel that is also changing. The overall awareness about water issues, as well as the water cost going up, will change that going forward. Good. And speaking about that, I know that Fabege, before we came in, you had already invested in connecting smart water meters across all of your buildings here. Caroline, would you like to take us through the drivers for Fabege to do this investment?
Yeah, absolutely. Water is a very important sustainability target for us. And we have a target of saving 2% every year. We have been following our water usage on a monthly basis for many, many years. But now we have an even more data-oriented working method, and adding digital meters on all assets and finding ways to analyze our data in smart ways is a big part of that. So that's why we have invested in these meters. And water is still relatively cheap, so cost is not like the only driver for this, even though the prices have increased a lot over the last few years. So it's still not possible to motivate these investments entirely by reduced water cost, not yet at least, but we also have other drivers towards more efficient use of water. For example, the risk perspective is important when it comes to our insurances. And according to our insurance company, in general, approximately 70% of the damages in all buildings today are water related. So that is not only related to leakages, but also from water entering the building from outside when it's a heavy rain or something like that. But it's important for us to be in control of all things that can be a potential risk and a big cost, and water is a big potential risk. It's also an important factor and driver. Our customer satisfaction. A water leakage is often a big impact on our customers, so we wish to avoid that. And the sustainability area is one big driver for us also, and have been for a few years. When it comes to our sustainability certifications, for example, BREEAM and our sustainability benchmark, we report to GRESB every year, and it's important to us to perform well there. And we believe in the long run that water will be more and more important in all of these areas, cost and sustainability and risk.
Very good. Thank you, Carolina. It's been a pleasure working for Fabege. We're really driving the development forward there also with your very advanced approach already to digitalization in your buildings there.
Thank you.
Good. I believe, Kevin, we are getting questions in from the audience also, so maybe we conclude the panel discussion here and turn it over to the questions from the audience.
Yeah, let's go for it. So I think we've got maybe 4 questions so far that have come in that we can address live. So I'll start with the first one that came in. So that's really which markets is SmartVatten currently active in, and is this including the US?
Yeah, so we are active. We're primarily active in Northern Europe. We define Northern Europe as Scandinavia, Benelux, and Germany, but we follow our customers depending on where the customers have properties, right? So I believe we have currently installations in more than 30 countries around the world. So our offices are in Northern Europe, but our technology is universal and can be deployed in many different places. But outside Europe, well, there needs to be a little bit of discussion to make sure that it fits in that specific country. US, there are installations, specifically to that question, there are installations in the US. The one issue, we are currently not supporting gallons measurements, but we can of course fix that. But some customers have still opted to go with us for the US.
Great. And the second question, this is also directed towards SmartVatten. So is the technology better suited for property managers rather than asset managers? I would think that it really goes hand in hand. It's collaboration, but I'll turn that over to you, Carl.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's suited for both and not only those, right? I think when we work with customers and we listed a number of personas and roles that are affected and can use the technology, it's a list of 10 or 12 people across the building here. I don't know, Hanna, if you have some examples of different type of people you're working with there.
Well, it can vary a lot. We all have our challenges, right? So what is important to know is that wherever you are in the process of connecting the water meters or to digitize everything, it really doesn't matter. We will start where you are, and then we will work from there. So you can enter partnership even though you have come quite far or not. I mean, it doesn't really matter, and it can be different things that matters more to different people. So it's hard to say, but it benefits most people that work technicians that work inside the property to the asset managers and keeping the value of the property and keeping the health, so they don't end up with big leaks and damages, of course.
And Thomas, I think you may have an example to add in here.
Maybe. Yeah, thanks. Level example, I think so in economics a good that it has a good function for it allows you a portfolio level view, and it allows you to benchmark, and I think that's quite important for them to focus on that perspective, as well as for property managers. In the past we had a lot of our assets where property managers had to go manually check all of the meter readings, and you had no clue on what was happening on the asset in between. And consequently, now that in the end it just takes a picture of the meter reading, so they can get it digitally. They can now have access to the platform, and because more and more people are using Smartvatten, also they can use it for their own portfolio, which they're managing. So I think there's a great benefit to all. Also, even facility managers is a key aspect. So I think like in the end, on every asset, as I've mentioned before, you have an ecosystem, and depend how you look at it, Smartvatten can have a dedicated function for every person in that ecosystem. It's just clearly making the link, making a process, and then ensuring that the right person is identified for every link in the chain which you're trying to connect.
Nice. Okay, great example of an application. Thanks, Thomas. Yeah. So with that, I'll turn it to the next question, which is it's double layered, but I'll direct this towards the Cromwell team. So basically, how many buildings have you been able to implement the Smartvatten technologies for, and what was the timeline around that? And then secondly is really what was the timeline from hardware installment to real data access? So we can first start with maybe the scope of the technology being implemented, and then secondly, what was the timeline from implementation to data access?
Yeah, I can answer that. If I look at the Netherlands, that didn't take more than 2 weeks to make sure that we were on site. We got the gear in, then went to the site, put the gear on, plugged it in, and within a day we had the information. So I think within 2 weeks, everything is set. And looking at our portfolio, I've got it on screen at this moment, but I think we got, like, for the Netherlands, 10 buildings online, even with more than 1 meter on site. And we're looking at the possibility to create sub-meters within an office building to make sure that every tenant knows exactly how much water they are consuming.
Great, thanks for that. And maybe AXA, do you want to someone from the AXA team want to add in maybe the scope or if there's anything different in terms of implementation?
Definitely, I think some great points were raised here. I hope my connection lost and then my laptop doesn't fly away. But on that front, I think we started with a handful of assets in Benelux, so approximately our hotel portfolio and a couple of residential assets. And then what we did is what we typically do when we see that something works is we try to apply it to a much larger scope. So we brought Smartvatten to the German portfolio. We were like, guys, you did 12-ish assets, let's do 200. And on that front, we designed together, it was a journey together on how to approach from a handful of assets this large portfolio and develop with them a complete rollout process. So together with the Smartvatten team, we did a project management. We identified key stakeholders internally on the property management side and really developed a process for larger scale rollouts. So now we're trying to do the same in the other geographies that we cover, to ensure that the same process is followed, that we can do it in a short time frame. It took us about, let's say, Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but about a year to get approximately 200 assets operational in Germany alone, and we're now at 338, approximately 1.5 years later. So it's a massive amount of progress which has been made in a short amount of time. And I think that in a short The first step is designing this kind of process. How do you approach it, the stakeholders, and moving forward? And SmartVatten has been a great sparring partner along the way, with whom we've learned a lot in terms of how to tackle this kind of large portfolio level approaches. And now we're moving to the next step, which is expansion and quality review.
Nice, good to hear. And Caroline, from the Fabegea perspective, how have you been approaching this?
Yeah, we already, as I said, we already have the meters covered, and we are now during the spring implementing this new way of work. But I think it's more related to us. What takes time for us is more related to our own processes and to know how to make sure that the right person gets the right information in the right time. So the technology to be implemented is not does not take that much time, but we need to find an efficient process to work with the deviations we find and how our technicians will handle it practically. So a few months from now, I think we will be up and running.
And maybe if I can, provide some additional perspective to the Fabegea case, there is no hardware involved from SmartVatten there. You had already connected everything. You had data being collected, right? But this was a question of SmartVatten's contribution there is just to run it through our platform to analyze the data and get the alarms and so on. And then you're distributing it via your own systems to the right people here. And you're pointing to the fact, which I think everyone is pointing at, that it's technology is one side. You need to get the data and get the alarms, but how do you engage the whole organization to really take action around the insights? That's also a very important factor where we need to partner very closely with the customer.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got about 8 minutes left, and there's still a couple of questions that have come in. So I can start with one directly. This is actually a question for the GRESB team, which I'm the representative here. So that's around: is it a requirement for GRESB that the metering is automated? So in terms of the data that we collect, we of course rely on our participants to submit the water data, energy data, carbon emissions data, etc. It's not a requirement that that data that's being submitted comes from a smart meter. However, there is an area of the assessment where we look at basically the implementation of smart metering and whether that's been done at an asset level. So if that has been done at an asset level, there is, of course, points contributed to that if smart metering technology has been applied. But in general, the way that data is collected, what we score is actually, is their data present? So whether that's coming from invoices, smart metering, etc., it's as long as data is present, you can, of course, receive those points for that specific asset in terms of data coverage. Another question I've got, and this is directly for the Cromwell team. So do you have tenant portals for the occupiers to measure their own usage? So basically, can a tenant log in or an occupier log in and understand their own usage, and can they access that information?
At the moment, no, because it's still a difficult journey to get tenants to share their data, specifically on water. I think we've had, in France specifically, we've engaged a lot around energy data, but then water is the next step, and we're trying to factor that in our lease agreements. But this is an ongoing journey. So at the moment, we don't have any tenant that are sharing their water data, except for a number on an email or on an invoice. So this is very basic. So you can see there is a long journey to go to capture data on the tenant side. However, I think we get more and more requests around not just energy, but waste and water. So we try to see how we can give them access to portal. On the DP side, it's possible. On the SmartVatten side, this is something we need to, once we have identified the tenant meters, and maybe through sub-metering, because this is also a step that we need to do in most of our light industrial assets. So when we get there, yes, we make sure that they have access to their own data.
Let me just jump in there, Sandrine. In the Netherlands, for 1 or 2 objects, it is possible. One of the objects is single tenant. So we grant them access, of course, to make sure that they keep track of their own consumption, to create awareness. And one of the other objects is just to give them an insight. It's a multi-tenant building in which they have a larger part than all the other tenants, one tenant that is, so they can have a view of what the water usage, how much water usage it is at that property. So it is possible, but I think in case it is a single tenant, it's far more easier to act on that. And in the case we have sub-meters for the future, I think that's going to be a single point of login then for a sub-meter on a location. Over to you, Thomas.
Great, thanks to both on the Cromwell team. I think just given the time that we've got left, I think what we can do is just follow up with just one more question, which is really regarding portfolio rollout and cost effectiveness when you're looking at a larger portfolio. So, Carl, I think you mentioned you could start with this one, so I'll turn it to you to kick that one off.
Yeah, so portfolio rollouts is of course very, very important for our customers. They want a solution that works across the whole portfolio. And I just share from Smart Vatten's perspective, this is really what we're there to help with. And I think our largest deployments, our largest portfolios is more than 1,000 assets. And we've done that in less than a year, actually. So I think, I'd really be happy to talk to anyone who's interested in portfolio rollouts, how we can help with that.
Okay. With that, I mean, I think we can go ahead and wrap up. We've really covered most of the questions. So if there was anything specific that we may have missed, we'll do our best to follow up directly with that person that asked the question. But yeah, from there, I think we can go ahead and close out the event. So Carl, do you want to maybe close us out?
Sure. Well, thank you, GRESB, for having us. Thank you to our panelists for sharing all of the insights and for sharing some of the examples and best practices of how we can work together to advance the water issues in the ESG strategy. And thanks to all of the audience who have joined us today. And I hope we'll meet. And we're very open to have a discussion about how we can help you also with water management going forward. So feel free to reach out to the Smart Vatten team, or I think also the panelists will be open for a discussion on how they're handling the situation going forward.